Welcome everyone, it's Chobra. Now it's the last day of 2024, and before we let this year go by and start talking about everything in 2025, I just wanted to take some time to look back on some of the best parts of Valorant Champions Tour Pacific this year. So, without further ado, introducing the first ever annual CHOBRAWARDS. Now, for our very first Chobra Awards, we're going to keep it simple. Most of it's going to be the typical categories that we're used to. So things like best player in each role, so Duelist, Initiator, etc. We included Flex. We have an IGL role in there as well. And then we'll celebrate some of the more nuanced positions like the coach, maybe the best Oper. And then we'll have a couple fun moments as well. It's all pretty straightforward, and I'll explain my classifications for each category as we go through them. So first up, Best Duelist. Now, I wanted to make this very clear that when I say Duelist, I really mean entry, right? And therefore, in my opinion and my definition, I mean the space creator. This works for both attack and defense, right? On the attack, obviously, generally the Duelist is the one expected to go in, the first one through the door to open up the site, things like that. But even on defense, right, they're the ones that are going to usually take that first contact, go out for that information, or on the retake, they'll go in again, create space, draw that aggro, things like that. Now, this doesn't just mean that you're just using your abilities or positioning well. I mean, sometimes you create space by getting frags, right? Maybe you go in and get a triple kill. That creates a lot of space. So I just want to make it clear, it's not like I'm trying to downplay frags, but I also just want to make it very known that I'm not just basing it off of stats. So for our very first Chobra Awards, our best duelist from VCT Pacific 2024 will be Genji's Texture. Look at how happy this guy is. I was very torn on this. Now, I think some people who have followed me for a while will know that I'm kind of notorious for maybe not giving Texture all the flowers he deserves. And I just want to repeat myself again. It is not at all that I think Texture doesn't deserve any of the praise he gets. I think he deserves all of it. I just think a lot of other players also deserve praise in their own ways or in different categories. But when I look back at the entire year, right, not just specific games, not just specific matches or specific even splits or stages, I look at Texture and I just think, I mean, he was doing everything that Genji needed him to do as a duelist. Now, did he have off games compared to his usual standards of basically being probably the best duelist, right? I think a lot of people would agree. In Pacific, sure. You know, he's had his ups and downs, but even on the days that he did have downs, he would find that one round, right? He would get that one ace, he would get the 4K, he would get the clutch that turns things around, and then he would also make sure that he's carrying that confidence. And then on top of that, if you get to know the team, if you've seen any of their other content or you listen to their voice comms, you know, you've come and seen them in the stages and the audience and things like that, you'll notice that, I mean, we all know his reactions, right? So you'll notice that he's also just a big part of the vibes and the energy for this team. Even when maybe he's not playing well or he's not feeling well, he's always trying to make sure that he's able to carry that momentum forward for the team. So when you look at fragging power, opping, you know, going in and creating space, being sacrificial, I mean, Texture's got it all. He is not just playing for stats. He's not just playing for frags. He's made it very clear himself that he thinks duelists and entries, right, duelists need to be able to sacrifice themselves, that it's not about you getting the frags, it's about you getting the win for the round, and you love to hear that from a duelist. Now, there are some honorable mentions, and I've said this time and time again. When I think of space creating, I automatically think about Buzz, and this is why personally I was a little torn, but then you also have to consider just, I mean, Texture carried his actions to victory, right? So unfortunately for Buzz, there is a bit of a stark contrast there in what each of them achieved here in 2024. But I would say Buzz was very, very notable in the fact that you could just see the absolute determination to create space. And one way I think Buzz maybe stood out to me more in that sense was because I think his team needed more from him individually to make that happen. Whereas Texture was more about, you know, finding that way into the team, and then when push comes to shove, he's still able to do, certain things on his own to make a round happen or to make a play happen. Buzz, I think, especially this year with DRX going through, a couple of roster changes in the middle of the year, things like that, was in a position where it was either he does it all or he doesn't. And that's not anything against the team. I think that's just the circumstances they were in, but Buzz answered the call, and I give him a lot of credit. Another player I want to give a shout out to is May. We can meme all we want about DFM, and we can, talk about May and friends or help, no help, things like that. But at the end of the day, I think May was ready to dive in. He was consistently diving in, getting double kills, getting triple kills. And even if, the team wasn't set up for it, or even if, the previous couple rounds or matches, things didn't really go their way, he's still diving in, trying to make space happen. Now, obviously, it wasn't very clean team-wise, but hopefully this year, or going into 2025, I should say, that kind of action continues from May, and we see some different results. So just want to give 2 tosses out for honorable mentions, but at the end of the day, you gotta give the absolute best duelist award to Texture. Next up, we have the best initiator. Now, this one's a little tough because obviously you have 2 types of initiators in Valorant. You've got the ones who are actually initiating combat, right? So the flashes, the stuns, things like that. And then you've got the info-heavy initiators like the Sovas and the Fades. But we're just going to group it all up. We don't want to get too nitty-gritty. But generally, I just mean the person who's setting up. So whether it's getting them information, whether it's setting up the duelist or whoever else is going in for the fight for success, things like that. And our very first Best Initiator Chobra Award goes to Team Secret's Envy. This was a tough one, actually. It wasn't until I was thinking about the Chobra Awards that I realized, Pacific doesn't actually have as many standout initiators. This doesn't mean that we have bad initiators. It just means that we don't have, the likes of Rienz or Leo, when we were seeing him playing official matches. Any other players like that where, in their era, right, when Crashies, right, back in the Optic days, everyone agreed, like Crashies, Saucy, like these guys, they were always the go-to de facto initiators. And generally, we also see that come from a lot of the Sovas. I mean, even in, Korea, you had Zest back when he was on DRX, right? But coming into Pacific, especially in 2024, we had great teams and we had good moments. We had good synergy. But I don't know if we really had anyone that stood out as an initiator. It was either you were really good at fragging, or you were a flex who was a pretty good initiator, or very specific agents, things like that. Now, Envy mostly plays the flash initiators, and he actually started flexing around a lot more in 2024, playing a couple of these other controllers, fulfilling different roles for the team. But I would argue that continuing on from 2023, he continues to be just the absolute top player for Team Secret, right? He's always at the top of the board, or near it at the very least. So not only is he getting frags, he's getting there for backup, he's getting the trades, he's getting the clutches. But on top of that, he's not using all his utils selfishly. He is able to set up his team for success as well. He's always there when a play is about to happen for Team Secret. He's a very key part of how they operate. And I would argue that he has still fulfilled, well over the given role and responsibility for himself. Now, honorable mentions for Best Initiator. Listen, we got to give a shout out to the Locky of Valorant. Memes aside, stats aside, he was obviously a very, very crucial part of Gen G's success. The info he's able to get, the util usage that he had, the timings he had, and then while this isn't completely tangible and we don't know the full story, as far as we can tell and as far as we are told, obviously the addition that he had to the comms and how they were able to make calls as well. This all goes in line with Best Initiator, so I want to give him a shout out, but I think at the end of the day, specifically within Pacific, I am counting international appearances, by the way. I'm counting international performances, but I think Envy just stands out much more as a standalone initiator. I also just wanted to give a quick shout out to Rossi. Obviously, we didn't get to watch him for the whole year on T1, but he was one of the most consistent parts of T1, and I thought he was doing very well on that Flash Initiator role for that team. I think he was one of the reasons they were even able to stay relevant in the beginning part of the year, and I think we found out that performance individually was not a fluke during the offseason, the brief offseason that he had with C9 as well. So just wanted to give him a shout out. Hopefully we get to see him land on his feet and play more official matches in the future as well. Next up, Best Controller. And I wondered what kind of title I want to give them, right? The Initiator we called the setup. So the controller, because controllers do a lot of different things. You're usually the one that has to kind of start the action, right? The set play, the play, because you got to see the smokes go down before you're able to go in, as long as your controller is alive. But at the same time, you're also kind of one of the anchors a lot of times. A lot of times, the controllers are the lurkers as well, depending on the map and the agent. You're doing a lot of things from behind the scenes. And so I decided to call him the fixer, right? You're the one who's able to solve these problems for your team one way or another. And I think this one, we've always had some pretty strong ones here in Pacific. But for 2024, the best controller Chobra award goes to Gen G's Charon, to nobody's surprise. Now, I will actually add a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm actually not so sure if I would yet consider Charon the best controller. I just think he's probably the best player that is playing controller in VCT Pacific. What I mean by that is I think he's just so individually talented, and that he has grown so much within the year that you take the individual talent that he had, just incredible individual talent that he had compared to any of his other rivals, and then you start to add on throughout 1 year, his very first year as a pro, a lot of the nuances of team play and pro play. And then the overall average is just much higher for Charon. But when I think about specifically like controller play, do I think Charon is undoubtedly in the top? I don't think so. I think he's definitely in the discussion, right? I think he's definitely a candidate. But I don't know if it's as clear cut. However, obviously, Valorant, you do have individual plays as well. Gunplay is a very big part of it. And it's not like Charon is playing recklessly and getting, clutches out of his butt or whatever it might be. He is positioning well, right? He's finding good timings, and we saw that growth as well. It's very hard to ignore that. So just huge round of applause for the rookie coming in to Gen G, and he's going to be my best controller for 2024. Some other honorable mentions. Mind Freak has really returned to form, I would say, in 2024. And while Paper Rex had a lot of ups and downs this year trying to find their identity, they also obviously had kind of roster changes back and forth with Jing leaving and then returning. So they had a lot of things to go through, but I think Mind Freak consistently was trying to be that anchor as that controller that was kind of keeping the center of the team. And I would say overall, he was really back in form individually as well. And I'm excited to hopefully see that continue, because when Mind Freak's at his best, I used to argue that I think he was my favorite, my best controller within the overall Pacific region when he was playing at his peak. So hopefully we see that continue. And then oftentimes, maybe just based on team results, somewhat forgotten or not as mentioned, I think Jit Boys sometimes flies under the radar. I think once he's mentioned, everyone agrees that he's a very talented controller. But I think also this year, they were working through making sure that the comms was going to work in English. And, the team has talked time and time again about how much effort Jit Boys puts into that as well. But there were definitely games and rounds where we saw, okay, a bit of a breakdown here, like what's going on. It wasn't as much as 2023, where I think all of us around the world agreed, all right, like Jit Boys is by far the most consistent and reliable and best player on talent. It wasn't the same situation, but I would argue he's still very much up there. He's still a very crafty player in the controller role, and he's reliable for clutches and things like that. Moving right along, the best Sentinel. And I'm going to call the Sentinel the insurance. This is the person you have to ensure that you're going to win the round. Maybe it's because they are the last one alive and they need to get that clutch. Maybe it's because they're the ones who's just going to hold on to that site for as long as possible, making the round easier for yourselves. Maybe you've planted them deep in for a lurk so that if things go south, they're able to still make something happen at the end of the round. Maybe they're just the one that needs to go out and get that last piece of information because things aren't going your way, or your Initiator got caught, in the very beginning of the round. Whatever it is, this is that person. When things go wrong, you look at them and you say, what you got, right? What do you have for us? This is why we've set you up, or this is what we needed you to do. Can you pull through for us? Kind of similar as a fixer, but to me, the insurance is the one you're really relying on as a last resort. And I don't think this is going to surprise anyone with the way I've been talking all year, and especially at the end of the year. Is there any suspense? I didn't think so. It's got to be Meteor. It's got to be Gen G's Meteor. I think I think nobody is going to contest this now, right? When we finish the year and we've had some time and you think back to the squad, you now see how the new Gen G operates and what else they need to learn and what else they need to adapt to. You look at all that and you have to realize he was such a key part of this team. He was just so rock solid. He was so rock solid, right? He was there when Texture wasn't able to perform, just able to carry through long enough to get Texture back online. And even when, everyone is playing very well, he's the one who's constantly just getting them so much information by digging deep into enemy territory, by taking these 1v1s, by finding the timing. And part of it, you could argue, is definitely just overall team prep, right? It's the playbook. I'm absolutely sure of it, right? Especially just knowing the way that Coach Solo liked to play Valorant in the past as well. I'm sure a lot of it comes down from the coaching staff and the IGLing from Munchkin. But then you watch some of the games and it's like, well, this had to have been an individual effort or a team effort, right? Just through comms, and Meteor's kind of taking some initiative as well. The other part is you can talk all you want about timings of taking 1v1s and going for alerts, but if you can't win that fight, it doesn't mean anything. But Meteor is able to do that, and that opens up so many more possibilities, because now you don't always have to hope that the timing is perfect and you're not spotted, or you catch them as they're exiting. You're able to still just say, okay, well, this is the timing we need, and if I run into someone, I will take that fight and win. And then on top of that, the clutches, right, and the anchoring, the util usage. He has transitioned so well that it almost makes you forget that he used to be a pretty star duelist, right? He was a very shining part of Northuption back in Japan before he joined VCT Pacific through Gen G last year. So you think back to that, or even last year, right? He was still one of the duelists that people said, he's so talented. We'll see if the team play can come through, if we'll see if he can unlock one extra level, things like that. And now we don't mention that anymore. And that's just how well he's transitioned as a Sentinel. Now, there are some very strong honorable mentions for Pacific. And the first one I want to give a shout out to is Wild Oreo. He comes in the later half of the year for Team Secret and just blows people out of the water right off the bat. And you could argue in the beginning, okay, well, first game in, he's fresh and he's feeling confident, whatever else it might be. But no, I would say all the way to the end, Wild Oreo did not disappoint. At no point watching his games did I feel, oh, okay, maybe it was a bit of a fluke, right? There was none of that. It was much more, okay, I can't wait to see how this guy grows once he's playing more in Pacific, once he's playing at the highest level consistently. I think he was a big reason that Secret stayed relevant in the second half of the year. I would argue he was a very strong upgrade for this roster. And I'm excited to see, because I think he's got the right idea, similar to what we saw from Meteor, on what he needs to do as a Sentinel for his team. And we'll see if he's able to unlock more of that in 2025. Of course, Flashback, big talk of the town at the beginning of the year. He did have to take a break in the middle, but he returns and he's playing just as well mechanically. Flashback's very good, but I actually almost considered maybe putting someone else here in the honorable mention, just because Flashback's another situation where I'm like, okay, is he a really, really good player that's playing Sentinel, or is he a really, really, really good Sentinel? I'm not actually sold yet. However, Flashback is also a rookie, right? He's very fresh, so we'll have to wait to see in 2025. And I do think he'll grow into becoming a very good Sentinel player. I think we just need to see confirmation going into 2025. If it wasn't Flashback, there's actually so many candidates. Several of the Paper X boys who are playing Sentinel every now and then. Same thing with Talon, right? Ban whenever he's on that Sentinel. You can talk all you want about consistency, but I think as a Sentinel, Ban was oftentimes really fulfilling the role he needed for the team and doing it willingly. So that would have been a consideration, but Flashback, just the mechanical skill, I think already puts him right up in candidacy. And then as he grew all the way to the end of the year, I think he just slips into the honorable mention category. Now, another category that's always a bit contentious, just because the definition of flex is all over the place. It's not a given role, right? So for me, it's just going to be, okay, who's the king of all trades, right? Not a jack of all trades, because that doesn't really do much for your team. You got to be the king of all trades if you want to be the best flex. Otherwise, you're just a flex, right? That's what jacks do. But kings, they become the best. And so within Pacific, we have a couple players who have continuously grown really into the flex role or the flex position, but none does it better than Forsaken, the OG flex of Pacific. He plays everything. First of all, he plays everything, okay? So that's big. And now there are more players that are picking up on that. More teams are realizing that, okay, we got to kind of break out of our shells. We got to have players who are able to play whatever we throw at them so that we can flex around and do different compositions and whatnot. But I would argue that Forsaken is actually able to perform above the average for his team on most roles that he plays. There are a couple that are a little bit weaker just because the other ones are so good, and there are a couple that I think he still needed to learn more of in 2024. But aside from that, I would say that he is able to transition his play style and the team's play style into whatever role he's playing, right? So whenever he goes back to Duelist, he's still able to dive in, be that crazy Duelist who's just creating space alongside his teammates, usually a double Duelist setup. Whenever he's playing Flash Initiator, he's able to go aggressive and push with his team, constantly being at the front line with them while using that utility to just catch people off guard. When he's playing Sentinels, he's playing far back and then he's going for these aggressive lurks similar to Meteor because he knows he's going to be able to win a lot of these 1v1s, right? When he's playing controllers like Harbor, he's just getting all sorts of crazy crafty, but using all his utility to make sure they can go in and take those fights. I mean, the way that he's able to think around and the way he gets creative, now sometimes a little bit too much, sometimes he gets a bit mad scientist-like, but I love to see that. And I love to see that they're still iterating on it, that he's still iterating on it, and most importantly, that he's willing to do it, but it never feels like, oh man, Forsaken got robbed here because he had to play this role. No, I mean, he may not be enjoying every single role, who knows, but he does it, and none of us are questioning if he was forced to do it against his own will. We're all accepting it as a good part of Paper Rex, and I think that's very hard to do convincingly, and throughout the years, right? I mean, this is one of those categories I think it's hard to ignore the past as well, because he's been doing this for quite some time now. Honorable mentions. Does it really matter whose name we add on to the tag after those two teams? Quite frankly, I really just wanted to say all of Paper X and all of Talon. Well, I guess Mind Freak would not be included, but they all flex around so much. I mean, especially Talon. It's like, okay, well, are we considering Ban the Flex? Are we considering Governor the Flex? Actually, they're probably all flexes on that team, so that gets a little tough. But if I had to pick names, I want to give it out to Devi. The only reason I think there was some argument within Paper X for other candidates is because, to me, something is really growing into another great flex player as well. Not as diverse, but he's able to pick up, right, more of the initiator roles and really still fulfill not just the utility, but also continuing with the fragging, the opping, things like that. But you look at overall agent pool, Devi is right up there next to Forsaken. I mean, when they're playing the lower finals against DRX in stage 2, I believe, he plays 5 different agents across 5 maps. In fact, I think in that game, in that match, maybe all of Paper X played 3+ agents across all 5 maps. I'm not quite sure, but they all play a lot of agents. But Devi has also just been right up there, right next to Forsaken, fulfilling whatever position he needs to, and we all continue to learn time and time again that he's very reliable in that role. And I want to give out a shout out to Ban. I know that Ban gets a lot of heat. I know he does. And from a fan perspective, I don't think that's necessarily unjustified. Now, does that mean that it's correct criticism? No. But obviously, the fans don't always have all the information. So when you just look at results, when you look at certain rounds, and usually anything that's a bit more of an egregious negative sticks with you a bit longer than maybe some of the more consistent positives. And so, okay, I can see where the criticism comes from. I mean, there were games where I'm looking at Ban play and I think, oh man, like Ban needed to do more here, or oh man, like Ban really needed to change how he does this. I felt that way from the outside as well. But then you look at the overall picture. I mean, and maybe I'm just being sold by Coach Frost, but honestly, when you take a step back, I get why Frost is always bigging up Ban, right? I get why he's always talking about how Ban can play every agent and that he trusts him with that. That's why they're able to have all these different compositions, etc. Because he really has played a lot of different agents in a lot of different ways. And when he shines, he really does shine, right? And so I think when you're looking at the positives that he brings, the positives that he has, I think you have to give him credit where credit is due. Now, unlocking that consistency, that's not just on him, but him and the rest of his team. So I want to put him in the honorable mention, right? I think that's exactly what it is. He's an honorable mention, and hopefully we get to see him flourish even more on that front. Now, the best IGL. This one, I know why sometimes some groups or some people don't like talking about it because, again, we never really know. exactly what the IGL has done for the team, what it looks like. Is it a team effort? Is the IGL just like making the decision itself? Are they actually making every single call? There's a lot of things, but I just want to celebrate IGLs. And I think this year it's actually pretty easy here in Pacific because it has to be none other than Gen G's Munchkin. He was voted IGL of the year for VCT Pacific as well by an absolute landslide. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, we just look at the way that Gen G plays, the positions that Munchkin takes. I think that's where I can tell, okay, well, at least for this team, at least for Munchkin specifically, I know that he has a big impact on the calling. Like, I know his IGLing has a big impact because he's always in the right position at the right time, or he's always in another position where he's able to get that information. So I want to give him the shout out. Now, this doesn't mean, again, when it comes to IGLs, this doesn't mean like Munchkin's actually doing all the work and he controls everything and he's just better than every other IGL in the in the region in doing that. I just think Gen G's very, very well set up for the IGLing. I really do. I think the way they play, I think their playbook is really good. But also, then the flip side would be that, okay, well, Munchkin's kind of the core part that's remembering that playbook, right, and executing it. So when we discuss IGLs, it should never be a discussion in comparing someone. How do I want to phrase this? It should never be a discussion about who's worse. It should simply be a matter of celebrating who's good. And that's how I look at it, right? So this does not mean that Munchkin is like just a better IGL no matter what team he goes to. He would change the team. That should never be the discussion when it comes to IGL because we have no idea. We have no idea. What I do know about Gen G is it's definitely a team effort. You look at the way they move. You look at the defaults they have set up. I mean, this is drilled by the coaching staff. This is locked in by all the players. And once all those pieces are there, Munchkin was very good at identifying what to do next. Now, the other reason I think I have no problem giving it to Munchkin is also because there were rounds where it was very clear that Munchkin just made a call, right? He goes for a Hail Mary, whether it's on his own or he calls the team to make a Hail Mary, and he reads it really well, right? Maybe it's after a timeout, or maybe it's just, on a series of rounds, he kind of recognizes the pattern so far, and he makes that call. Again, is it always 100% only Munchkin? I don't know. Probably not. But those are the moments where I'm like, okay, well, he has the confidence to do that, which I think is a aspect of IGLing we don't discuss enough of. So it's Munchkin. Quite frankly, I don't think anyone really would have argued with me picking Munchkin. So you might be thinking, why is he going on for so long? But I just want to make sure that when we discuss IGLs, we are discussing it a bit more properly, where we're celebrating IGLs rather than saying, oh, they're just better than the other IGLs. They're not as good, right? Like Munchkin would change, X team. And that's not always true. Munchkin used to be on a team that was not very good, right? So let's just make this very clear that it doesn't always work for every single roster. But in that vein, honorable mentions, I've always really, really respected Cruz on talent throughout his career with that squad as an IGL. But I would say even this year, even more so, right? With them working under new coaching, with them working into more English comms, things like that. I would say that Cruz still is putting in the work and is quite apparent when it comes through. But I think talent overall, I think this year was... They were really in the forging process. So it's very hard to say, if I were to give any of them like strong awards, it would have kind of been on the assumption that we're going to continue to see it succeed, which I hope it does, but we never know. So I think that's the only part for Cruz, even for the IGL category, where, okay, well, especially IGLing, it's like kind of dependent on the result because we can't always tell exactly what's going on. And then Jesse Vash, which I guess I forgot to recapitalize the V. I'm pretty sure he capitalizes that, so my bad, Jesse. But Jesse Vash on Team Secret. Personally, I don't actually like Team Secret's way of playing Valorant. I don't. I'm not a fan of their style. I don't like it. But within that realm, Jesse Vash does a pretty good job. Within that realm, he knows how they want to operate. Within that realm, he knows what they need to do. His flowchart is quite well set up. And then on top of that, it's very clear that he does his research, especially on the Sova, to make sure that he has tricks up his sleeve to set themselves up for success. Just want to give him that shout out. This year, actually, some of the other big candidates would have been, say, for instance, Stax, right, who used to be on DRX and then joined T1 partway through the year. And I think... while I've never been as big on Stax' IGLing as other people have, watching him in the offseason, I'm big on him again, right? I am big on him as an IGL on the new T1 roster, but we didn't quite see that come through this year, right? Beginning of the year, DRX was still kind of struggling and floundering. And then when he joined T1 was struggling and floundering to try to find their own color and style. So I don't think Stax really had the opportunity to come and shine through as an IGL just yet, but he is definitely someone you should be looking at for 2025 to make a resurgence as a leader. Now we're wrapping up the roster portion here, and we're going to be talking about the best coach. And the coaches, they're the mentors, right? These are the people we're looking at who are guiding our players that we love to watch play Valorant. And we're just going to jump right into this one because the preamble is not going to mean anything. We have to talk about it after the reveal that my Chobra Award for Best Coach goes to HSK. Now, I'm not trying to take Solo out of the equation. But this was honestly, this was one of the situations where I think Solo's getting enough of the praise that he deserves, and a lot of people are always including HSK in that discussion. But I just want to drive it home one last time before 2024 passes that I really, really want to give a lot of respect to HSK. Yeah, maybe this one's not fair because I think part of it is just the story of his career, right? You know, being on DFM, 0 wins. People are wondering just what's going on with that team. People are questioning the entire coaching staff. He comes out of it. Genji picks him up, and everyone's like, Genji does what? And then he compiles this roster, and we're like, okay, yeah, it looks pretty good, but who's this Charon guy? And then Solo comes in, they have great chemistry, and then they win a Masters. But while we're not entirely sure on all the details of how that coaching responsibility is divided up, we do know that he is there and that he kind of challenges Solo along the way so that they continue to grow off of each other. If I'm not mistaken, you know, some of the players and the staff have also talked about how HSK is a bit more focused on the individual aspects and things like that. But I think that meant a lot for this squad of Gen G, because first of all, you have a rookie like Charon who definitely needed that guidance, but then you have players like Meteor who's changing roles and things like that. And I think we always praise Gen G as a team, but in that discussion is always included the fact that they're all fraggers, right? They're all aimers. And I think that part is a very core part of the Gen G color in 2024. And again, regardless of how it's actually divided up, I just want to give a big shout out to HSK. I just think he deserves a bit more of the moment in the spotlight, but hopefully many more to come in the future. Again, nothing against Solo. I think he deserves it as well. I just wanted to kind of do a single coach instead of coaching staff. Honorable mentions here. You can never leave Alex out of the conversation when it comes to coaching in Pacific. Right? The fact that he's able to wrangle those 5 players, the fact that he is able to continue to find ways of that crazy W gaming style to work in every meta against every different team and iteration in Pacific, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. And then on top of that, it's very clear that he tries his best to be a good mentor and, you know, a good role model figure for the players, really caring about his players. Always consistent applause for Alex as a coach. And, I don't know how spicy this is going to be considered, but I actually give a big honorable mention to Frost. You know, like it or hate it, he does have his very, very own philosophy about Valorant, about running a team, things like that. And it's very clear, and this isn't against Frost or anything. I think just subjectively, you tell anybody who knows both sides of the coins, and you would know immediately, okay, that's going to be tough to make work out here in Pacific, no matter which country you go to. So, he's going through that battle, but he's made big changes to Talon. Now, the consistency is still a bit shaky, right? Especially compared to how they talk about their own team and maybe the peaks that we've seen as viewers as well. But he's done a lot of changes. They did play a lot of different comps, and most of them, I would say, they've at least convinced us what they were trying to do, even if it's not always a clean win. And I mean, that's a great start. Now, again, is this really the way to go? Is this the future of Valorant? I mean, that's up to them to prove even further. But I just want to give a big round of applause to Frost as well. Now, I think with his style of coaching and what he is going for, I think a year is too short. So I'm glad to see that he's continuing on, because I think 2025 will be the moment where we, as a group, right, collectively make a conclusion on, okay, was he a great coach for Talon? Or did it not work out? Now let's talk about some more niche parts. And this one was just kind of for fun, just because we have quite a few strong candidates in Pacific. But let's talk about the best Oper. And obviously, they're the sniper, right? They're using the operator. Who's the best with the operator? There are some strong candidates. I'm actually very curious. So let me know down in the comments below who your pick would be for this specific award, because I think this could get split quite a bit. I had some trouble. I kept swapping around my candidates here for Best Oper. But eventually, I settled on the Best Oper Chobra Award going to DRX Buzz. Is there a little bit of personal bias? Probably. I'm a huge Buzz fan. But also, I think this one, I'll just go ahead and say it. I think it's because of the impact it had for Buzz and DRX specifically, which it's kind of easier to do when your team's not in as much of a position to just be expected to win. So, you know, a bit more of those desperation moments, things like that. But also, I would say the reason to me eventually I settled on Buzz is because I think it stood out a lot more when he was opping and succeeding, right? Like, those are the moments where you were like, oh man, they really, like, that was the only thing they had going, and he's making it work. And then this wasn't really part of my consideration, but I think if you think back even further, Buzz, just like, you know, everybody else who's played Duelist here on DRX, was a player who he was really good, and his opping was good, you know, locally, but every time they went to internationals, right, things like that, it would just falter a bit. He just wouldn't be able to really find that consistency. He wouldn't be able to really find that calm, steady aggression as an opper, and so that was something that always followed him around, right? People always said, well, yeah, but his opping could be a little better. His opping's not at world level. And I think this year he proved that he didn't want to hear that anymore. So big props to Buzz. But I mean, there's a lot of options here. Obviously, texture. Some of those instant flicks are, you know, right around the corners. You know, he sees an elbow, he takes him out. Things like that. The reaction speed. But again, the argument. I think the difference for me was texture. It's just like he was just so good on all fronts that in some ways that kind of doesn't leave his opping as impactful in my memory. We're not looking at stats here, by the way. I'm not necessarily comparing stats 1-to-1. And then initially, I even had something from Paper X as my winner, because part of it was also the argument of it doesn't matter what agency he's playing. You're always afraid of when he picks up the operator, and he's actually quite successful with it no matter who he's playing. So to me, I was like, okay, maybe that's actually how you determine who the best operator is, right? And they're not just the best duelist or the best chamber. It's like, who's the best operator user? Oh, maybe it is something. And you know what? Maybe it still is the more I talk about it. But I mean, you could put any one of these three, and I don't think I would ever have a problem. One other mention I did want to give is actually Governor on Talon. But I took him out of the honorable mentions as well, because the biggest reason he stuck with me was because of that neon slide no scope on bind. I think he had a quick scope and then a no scope. I can't remember the exact order of sequences there, but that just kept replaying in my head. And then that would lead me to remember that, oh, actually, he's had some good long range moments as well. He's had some good snipe moments. But then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, but is that really like good opping, or is it just really good neon play? And I think that gets a little bit muddy. So I'll just give him a side shout out here for Best Oper. Now, the best game. And this has the subtitle Cultural Impact. Which game has stuck with me the most? Which game do I think kind of changed Pacific, right? Maybe it was just so epic. Maybe the emotions were just flowing through, things like that. Now, this one, international matches would not be included because I'm talking specifically like within Pacific. If you watched Plat Chat, or if you watch Plat Chat, you know what my winner is going to be. And I will not back down on this. It is going to be T1 versus DFM, the very first week of our regular stages in Stage 1, playing on Ascent. For those who don't remember, this was eventually the very first match win that DFM ever got in VCT Pacific. It was legendary, and they played a Cypher Viper composition on Ascent. They were breaking the mold, and they played it so well. Everyone, literally everyone watching the game. You know, I was watching it, you know, on the broadcast. People that were co-streaming, I mean, FNS was praising it, Sliggy was praising it. Everybody agreed this was genius. They played it so well. It's just so well thought out. It's so thorough, and it targets T1 so well. It just all comes together. It's just beautiful Ascent play without using the meta composition. It was so legendary. and then they could never recreate it. And then you find out, if you watched the documentary piece on VCT Pacific, that it wasn't like they didn't actually fully believe that this was going to happen. Like, it wasn't like oh yeah, like we know exactly how good this is. That's crazy to me, because to me, this changed a lot of ideas, right? This changed, how much more aware teams became of like double Sentinel setups, or, Viper and Cypher setups. We've seen it on other maps as well, but the way they were playing it on Ascent, it was just so much stronger, right? The way that the Cypher was setting up on Ascent, it allowed them to have very different setups in terms of their defaults because of the camera. And again, not all of it is new. It's just the way they executed it step by step was just so beautiful. And it changed the course of like every storyline, right? Suddenly T1 was this team where everyone was like, can we trust in this team? Suddenly DFM was like, maybe they're going to be the next dark horse. And they just weren't. They didn't become that. T1 did actually become a very unreliable team, but it just changed the entire storyline. I think it changed our expectations on hopefully seeing more compositions on Ascent and things like that. And so to me, I kept thinking about this. I kept thinking about which game sticks with you the most. And there's a lot of different candidates. For instance, I mean, this is much more the specific moment, but Mako getting that clutch to continue on against Paper X in the lower finals of Stage 2. I mean, that really sticks with me. There's a lot of different moments, but I mean, obviously Genji's victory at kickoff, things like that. And then every time I'm just like, yeah, but man, that Ascent, I just can't get over. I still can't get over it. I still can't get over how good it was. It's ridiculous. And there are no honorable mentions in this one, because nothing comes close to the impact this had for me. And if you disagree, you can leave a comment down below for this video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to continue that discussion. And even if you don't agree with this one, maybe you can leave a like on the video as well. Now, speaking of cool moments, let's take a look at maybe the coolest composition that we saw from VCT Pacific, because we actually saw quite a lot of very unique ideas, or at least different ideas. I mean, we've always had our own flavor thanks to Paper X, but now you had Talon as well, bringing out some funky compositions. So which composition did I think was the coolest, right? The most 5-head, 400 IQ play in VCT Pacific for 2024, and the Chobra Award for the coolest composition goes to Talon's Ascent a Zombie comp. For those who don't remember, Clove, KO, Sova, Sage, Phoenix. These guys are getting rezzed left and right. They have so many lives that they're not even playing Valorant anymore. They're playing a battle royale where you can res each other. I mean, this was very impressive. Also, just because to me it was almost artistic that they pulled it out against DRX, a team just historically known to play by the book. Obviously, they're changing their color a bit more as well, but there was just something poetic about that. And it became pretty clear that while, yes, the score was close, but it became pretty clear that DRX was also like, all right, so what do we do against this? Like, what do we do against this? Like, this is very weird. And I think it really served the purpose that they wanted it to. I just thought this was cool. I wanted to give this the award because I think this stands as an example that you can have these somewhat one-off compositions that are focused on a very different aspect. They're focused much more on the overall like ult economy and util economy and the timings you get from that, right? And this composition, the idea is that as long as you can guarantee X number of rounds through these ultimates and the way that you're able to pressure with that, then you win, right? Because the rest of it, maybe it's because of the map, right? For instance, like Ascent, it's much more defense-sided in the pro scene anyway, things like that. So I think it was a good reminder that, okay, there are other ways to think about compositions. While they may not always become meta, they could be good one-offs and pocket picks because maybe you just need that one map, right? Maybe you just need to get by this map, or maybe you think the map is a bit 50-50. So you go for this and you say, okay, well, if we win, even if it's a 13-11 or a 14-12 in overtime, a win's a win. So I thought it was very nice that we saw this brought up. Now, honorable mentions, I actually don't think enough time was spent talking about the composition that RQ brought out on Bind, where there was no Brimstone. I believe it was a Cypher Lock composition, Cypher and Denlock, and then they had Omen as a single controller, and then they had the Yoru as well. So it was a very funky composition, right? No traditional Initiator and no common controller for Bind. And obviously the initial reaction all of us had was, what? No Viper, no Brim on Bind? That's crazy. But the more I think about it, I really think that composition was very good. I thought it had ways to really overcome some of the weaknesses that the Cypher Lock has, but at the same time, really strengthening that on the attacking side, right? Where you were able to, because one of the difficulties that Cypher Lock has on the attacking side is you're strong on the attacking side because your post plan is so good, but you're already taking up 2 spaces with a Sentinel. So you don't actually have as much info play aggressively, right? You kind of have to go in, you have to play a little bit of contact for the very beginning of or for the first half of the round, because otherwise you're not really going to have good information on what your next move should be. But by having the Yoru alongside the Raze and then the Omen, you just had a lot more util to just power through and push through, right? And pick up the tempo whenever you wanted to. Now, on the defense, you already have 2 Sentinels, right? So now having a little bit more of this aggression where you can just pick these fights, pick these skirmishes, things like that. It goes a lot deeper than that, by the way. That's just on the surface level. But I actually thought it was a really cool idea. And I think it's a shame that they lost that match, because if not, I think a lot more of us would have been talking about it continuously. But I think the discussion kind of fell off and everyone just kind of wrote it off as like okay, yeah, NT. But I think it's worth going back and revisiting. And I'll be honest, after that, there wasn't really a strong candidate for another honorable mention. I mean, you could basically pick out any Paper X or Talon game out of the hat, and you'd probably have a pretty neat composition. But eventually I settled on, okay, when Talon brought out the ISO for the first time on Icebox. They had banned playing the ISO, they added the Clove next to it, and they started to solve the problem of Icebox by simply saying, well, why don't we just take the duel for free? And that worked out quite well for them. So that was cool. It just kind of showed the strengths of ISO and Clove, right? These newer agents. And it was a bit of a cool moment, but I don't think it was as stylistically cool as, say, the Ascent to Zombies comp. Now, best moment. This award, this Chobra Award, exists simply because I want to talk about this moment, okay? Quite frankly, this really shouldn't exist as an award, but I think it's just so funny. I think it's hilarious that this was even a thing that we had in 2024 in VCT Pacific. So the Chobra Award for the best moment, the best memories of VCT Pacific 2024 goes to Frost versus Termy's handshake beef. Let's just, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, let's just take a moment to travel back in time and revisit the historical moment. Now, this is DRX versus Talon in the VCT Pacific Stage 2 playoffs, all right? They're facing off against each other. And just take a look. The coaches are entering. Termy and Frost, they enter the arena. They're both looking a little bit nervous. They're getting ready. Oh, and what? Termy can't believe his eyes. Oh, he just can't believe it. He can't believe it. Frost is already in his head. Can we slow this down? Oh, no eye contact. The no look fist bump. I guess it's a fist bump beef, not handshake beef. Termy keeps looking back at him. Now, this started to spiral out of control. Now, just so we're clear, I guess I don't know if I've ever really stated my own opinion about this. Just so we're very clear, I think it's totally fair for Termy to feel that he was slightly disrespected, right? I think it's totally fair for Termy to feel that it was a bit unsportsmanlike, like, wait, what? Like, there was no need for this no matter what, right? It doesn't matter if you hate each other's guts. It doesn't matter if you're the best friends. It just seemed like a thing where I think it's totally okay for Termy to feel like, whoa, like a little bit slighted. But at the same time, I totally believe that Frost didn't really have any deep intentions to be like, screw you, man, right? And also, I just think it's one of those moments where it's like, yo, there was no need for that. And then, maybe, Termy says in an interview, or maybe they talk about it afterwards, whatever else it may be. I don't care how you resolve it. And then, Frost probably says, you know what? Yeah, my B. And then you move on. But like, so what I'm trying to say is yes, I do think Frost probably should have taken a little bit more care in the fist bump, but I don't think there was any deep, premeditated intention of really pissing Termy off just with that one fist bump. At the same time, you can tell Termy can't believe his eyes, and that part probably comes in, right? Just also, given his history and also just within Korea and all of that, just like, well, that should just like never happen on stage. And so Termy, Termy takes this personally. So he calls a timeout when they're up 12-4 in this match just to mess with him. And then Termy never does this, by the way. The next time he's on the Korean analyst desk for a pregame interview, we ask him about it, and he's like, yeah, well, I just think he was out of line. I just think he was immature. I think Frost is out of line. And we're like, yeah, so what was that timeout about? And he's like, yeah, well, I called it, and we talked about what we wanted to eat for dinner after the match and things like that. Like, he just straight up admitted that he did it to piss him off, which Termy never does. Like, he's always very composed. And I was just like, I just couldn't believe my eyes and ears. I was like, what? And the fan base was going crazy too. Everyone was like, what in the world is that? And then like Buzz is out on interviews, or he's telling his teammates on interviews to really stick it to him. I think it was Bane that did the MVP interview after that match, and Buzz tells it to stick it to him. And then Frost goes on Spike Talk, and he's like, yo, like, what the heck, man? Like, this is all some weird cultural difference. I don't get it, man. It's just broken. And they are both going off and off in their own ways. Their separate directions. It just became way bigger than I think it ever needed to be from either side. I don't think anyone's in the right here. I don't think anyone's in the wrong here. I do think it was probably a little bit unsportsmanlike, but I don't think it was like the most egregious thing I've seen happen, right? within VCT. But what a moment. It's just a moment that kind of flew under the radar if you weren't really paying attention. And then it just continued to get blown up, especially within the Korean community. So I just wanted to bring it up again. What a nice piece of memory. Yeah, honestly, the honorable mentions are they're just a little bit of a toss out here, just because this Chobra award only exists for Frost versus Termy. But Texture's 4K celebrations, all of them, very memorable. And of course, you have to give it to Gen G winning Masters Shanghai. I mean, that one, I think it meant a lot for all of us in Pacific, even if you're not from Korea. Now, the Unsung Heroes. I didn't have this in the initial table of contents because I didn't originally plan it. But the more I thought about it, I just felt that this year there were a lot of teams and players that were going through a lot of different things, right? There were a lot of big changes happening. There were a lot of transitions. There were a lot of players that were just doing their job in the backlines, and they just weren't getting the recognition, whatever else it might be. And I think there are a couple of players where you look at the way that I've given out the Chobra Awards and you say, wait, like, this person's not even in the honorable mention? Like, what's going on here? Like, that doesn't seem very fair. And I think this was a nice way to give some recognition to some of the players that I think deserve a shout out for their year in 2024, even if like the results or anything else doesn't quite point to it. So for the winner, I guess, the biggest unsung hero to me is going to be DRX Mako. He goes from the top controller in Pacific. He's the clutch master of DRX. He's the anchor. He's the pillar of DRX. To suddenly becoming the oldest member on this team. Suddenly, all of the veterans are just gone in front of his eyes. And then he needs to learn to IGL with a bunch of youngsters and a number of rookies. And that's impacting his individual play as well. He's been seen on stream, right, talking to Charon, being like, we're the same age, but why does Charon get to be, the youngster, the younger brother who's able to just like learn the game and enjoy the game while I have to deal with this and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a lot. If you really think about it, these guys are all young. The players are all so young. And for him to make that sudden transition, and maybe not necessarily willingly, right, to suddenly just wear this mantle of responsibility that you did not think was coming your way, maybe ever, and then taking it in stride, right, at least on the official stage, taking it in stride, living with it, working with it, enough that you're able to rediscover a bit of your own fire in the lower finals of VCT Pacific Stage 2, right? Bring your team to champions, and you're able to at least kind of, reestablish that DRX is still here, that you're still here. I think it deserves a lot of praise. However, the reason he wasn't in my controller conversation or anything like that is because I do think it impacted him a lot. I do think his individual play was not actually up to snuff for the majority of the year. That's unfortunate, but I think he still deserves a lot of praise and respect. Also, let's just be clear, as soon as they started testing freeing as the new IGL on this new roster during the offseason, Mako's back. So I think we're going to see him at full strength again in 2025. But I think then even more so it's meaningful just how he was able to weather the storm. Some people will say, it's only 6 months. But I think in his position, those 6 months were probably so grueling. And even now, he still has like a lot of responsibility as an older figure now on this team. But I think he's probably learned and grown a lot. So I want to give him a big shout out. Other honorable mentions, another DRX player, Bane, comes in suddenly to this team, has to fill in a lot of these slots, right, as a semi-flex initiator. And, I mean, he's been waiting for a chance like this. Now, overall, the consistency just wasn't there. When he pops off, he pops off. But when he doesn't, he doesn't. So that's unfortunate. But, again, doing enough to be able to be part of this team that went to champions, right, and rediscovered some of that fire, I think he deserves a big shout out as well. And again, just imagine the immense pressure, right? You're suddenly brought back in. I mean, you probably have a lot on your mind as well. Like, man, I waited all this time and now you want me back in, right? As kind of this emergency sub or, this emergency addition to the roster. Like, some people that would bother them, but he says, all right, this is a good chance. I'm going to play, with my teammates, and we're going to go as far as we can. I'm going to work as hard as I can. And I think he definitely improved. I think he just, this was the first chance he really had to kind of hit that wall at the top of the scene and realize what else he has to learn and grow in. But I just want to say he did it. He did the job, and it was not an easy job. So big shout out. I hope he's able to land on his feet. I guess I forgot to put the parentheses there. He's no longer on DRX, but I hope he's able to land on his feet and we see him again in the future with another opportunity because I think he was truly an unsung hero for DRX. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to Darion, right, of the old Bleed squad, because I think Darion was also one of those players that just quietly did the job that Bleed needed him to do throughout the years, not just in 2024, throughout the years. And then in 2024, it culminates with him being needed to come back to the Duelist role. And he does it, and he actually ends the year with some flowers for himself, right? He gets that ridiculous ace on Icebox, kind of revitalizes him and reminds a lot of people, or makes people realize, if you hadn't followed him and the SEA scene, the APAC scene beforehand, that he truly is another talented duelist. So, and obviously now with everything's that's happened with Bleed, I think even more so, just wanted to give him a big shout out of, okay, you weathered the storm. And I think you were at least able to prove once more near the end that, like, hey, I've still got what it takes. And he was still just, fulfilling the role. If it needed to be Sentinel, he was playing Sentinel, right? If it's Duelist, he goes back to Duelist, whatever else it might be. The good news for any Darion fans is he is joining GE for the first tournament because GE could not field their entire roster because Patrick couldn't come. The visa doesn't come out in time. So we get to see a bit more of him. And I hope he's just able to kind of play low pressure and just remind everyone that he's still here, this is another kind of doorway for him to get another opportunity in the future. And so now, after all of that, it comes down to one award. Chobra's Player of the Year in VCT Pacific 2024. Some of you probably think you already know the answer. There's a couple strong candidates. If you were to feed everything I've said into ChatGPT, right, on social media and on broadcast, the ChatGPT would probably give you two candidates, two options. I've spoken about a select few players just ad nauseum, every opportunity I got, and I thought back on this, and I think actually this one, depending on who you ask, I think it could vary quite a bit. I think it really depends on what you value. But since this is my channel and these are the Chobra Awards, I'm going to take one last opportunity of 2024 to remind you all who the best player was. Introducing our best player of the year for VCT Pacific 2024, and it is Genji's Meteor. Congratulations, Meteor. You are the first ever Chobra Awards Player of the Year. No one's gotten this award before. So prestigious. So happy that this guy is getting the recognition he deserves. The crowd is loving it. He deserves it. And I think I'm just happy that now with the offseason, and I don't mean this in a negative way, like at the cost of Gen G or anything, but, you know, people watching him play on T1, people seeing, you know, how the new Gen G needs to readjust. I think people in retrospect are saying, okay, maybe Meteor deserved even more praise. Just so we're very clear, it's not that he didn't get praise. I think he got a lot of recognition, right? He got MVP awards before and things like that throughout his year this year. But I think just at the end of the day, the flourish of texture oftentimes overshadowed him. And I'm not saying that's undeserved. I just think it should almost always be like a 50-50 discussion. But to me, I said it at the very beginning of the year. They won kickoff. I went back, and when I did my analysis, my conclusion was it's Meteor. Meteor was the pillar of that team. And it's ever more impressive because he used to be a duelist. He used to be a star duelist, and he goes into the Sentinel role, and he's kind of redefines how you need to play Sentinel out here in Pacific. He redefines what the standard is, what the goals are as a Sentinel player. And then every now and then, he's still able to play that jet. He's still able to flex onto a double duelist. Such a valuable member for any roster. And so I just want to give him one last big shout out for 2024 before we wait to see what he's capable of doing on his new team, T1, for 2025. So once again, congratulations on Meteor, or to Meteor, for a great year in 2024. And my goodness, am I jealous that he gets to be the first ever Chobra Award Player of the Year. So that's it for our very first annual Chobra Awards for VCT Pacific 2024. Yeah, you know, we kept it a little simple, but all greatness have humble beginnings, everybody. So I hope you get excited for more in the future. It was fun doing a quick retrospect of 2024, getting to talk about some of our favorite players and favorite moments throughout this year. What a year we had in VCT Pacific, and my gosh, we've been talking about it forever here in during the offseason, but 2025 is looking as promising as ever. I think it's going to be the best year yet for VCT Pacific, specifically. I think we're going to have some banger matches. I think it's going to be very tough to predict what's going to happen as the year continues on, so I hope you're all getting ready for it. Get ready for the flashbang. 3, 2, 1. I'm back on camera. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a comment down below. You know, tell me who your favorite player is. Tell me what you're looking forward to in 2025. Tell me what your New Year resolution is. No matter what it is, it all helps when it comes to the algorithm, so I would really appreciate it. And of course, if it's your first time here, consider subscribing to the channel. We also do a lot of live streams as well. These days I'm playing Path of Exile 2, but Valorant talk is always welcome, and once the season comes around, we're going to have a lot more Valorant to discuss right here on this channel. So don't go anywhere. Thanks for watching once again. Hope you guys have a great start to 2025. Thank you so much for spending time with me in 2024, and I hope there's many more to come next year. Thanks a lot, and have a good one.